Hello, and welcome to another episode of The End of the Search. And this one I call it, Is the Individual Self-Aware? And this is based on a comment somebody made in one of the videos in the Spanish channel. And the comment is, come on, living like animals, has anyone ever seen a chicken worried or depressed? Human beings are much more complex because they have self-awareness. And believing that this is always perfect is just another belief. Experience shows that this, and put in parentheses without adding thoughts, close parentheses, can be painful in and of itself. An illness, the death of a loved one, violence, a desperate financial situation. It's true that adding catastrophic thoughts will increase the pain, but suffering, and it puts a dukkha in parentheses, is a Buddhist term, I'll see why, exists in and of itself in experience. As the first noble truth of the Buddha states, and we all experience it, sometimes more intensely and sometimes less. Okay, let's go with the first part here, which says that human beings are they have self-awareness. Well, within the context of what we're remembering here, the human being doesn't have self-awareness because the human being is a projection in what is. When you're sleeping and you're dreaming and you dream that you're a human being in the dream, is that human being in the dream have self-awareness? No, have nothing. It's just a projection. If anything, the mind that projects the human being creates the illusion of a human being who has self-awareness. Okay, now, continue, it says, and believing that this is always perfect is just another belief. Well, depends what you mean, how do you understand perfect. Perfect doesn't mean that it's according to our human idea of what perfect is. What is implied here is perfect is because if it is happening, has to be perfect. Because the universe makes no mistakes. So whatever is happening is perfect. Now, if the mind uses it, or if it's used for the purpose of remembering who I am, then every experience is perfect because it's giving me an opportunity to come to the recognition that what I am cannot be as affected by anything that seems to be happening. If I forget who I am, whatever is happening is going to be evaluated by the mind, by the content of the mind, and that's when we say this shouldn't be here, this is imperfect, and all that stuff, and that creates suffering. Now we're going to address that in the next, when the person says, experience shows that this, without adding thoughts, can be painful in and of itself. An illness, the death of a loved one, violence, a desperate financial situation. Again, once again, here's a challenge. And by the way, if you hear like drilling, it's because there's construction going downstairs. So anyhow, yes. Pain is part of the human experience. Suffering, however, is not. Suffering is the mind's interpretation of the experience. So when it says can be painful in and of itself, like an illness, no, an illness is not painful. Some illness may be, but not others. Some illnesses are just basically, they're not painful, but they're just what is. The death of the loved one. Once again, the death of a loved one is not painful. What is painful is the interpretation that we make of that, because there are cultures who actually celebrate when someone passes on because they think that they're going to a better place. For example, okay, there's a lady by the name of Yolanda Duran Serrano, and she wrote a book was written about her called Silence Heals. And when she had this change of mentality, something that happened, she called it the thing, whatever. She didn't know anything about spirituality, just that she had this change in mentality. Her son, her only son, 19 years old, passes on, dies in a car accident. She didn't suffer it, and she wasn't celebrating either, but she knew who he was because she knew who she was, and consequently there was no suffering. And another example is when I was staying in Monterrey, Mexico, I was staying at a place with the lady who was there with me. She and her ex-husband at the time, they were spending time with I don't know if it's a group of I don't know if it natives or so in the northern of Mexico, in which they also have a belief system, a very different belief system around death. And the son of one of the families, the one that she was staying with, and her husband, they were doing some research for 6 months. They lived with them. He went to Monterrey, Mexico, to the city, and he got run over by a truck. I think it was a bus, so he passed away. So when they bring the body up to the I don't know what you call it, the reservation or whatever the case may be, or the community, she was destroyed. She was emotionally destroyed. And the father of the son had to console her, because the way they see it is that the son was going to go to a better place, and they put food and all that kind of stuff in the funeral just to let him know that he's going to have all that he needs. You see, so it's just belief system. And the person here is suggesting that it's just a fact. The fact is that if you have an illness that is painful, that's suffering. Again, some illnesses are painful and some are not. The death of a loved one, another belief. Violence. Look, I see violence in television, for example, and if according to my interpretation, that can affect me or not. You see? Of course, if you're talking violence towards oneself and it's you being hurt, yeah, it could be painful. But again, who's to say, right? I remember when I was a child, I fell on glass and I didn't feel any pain at all. And then I looked at the arm, and then I looked behind the arm, and I have 2 cuts in there. And when I saw that, that's when I experienced the pain. So is it really painful, the cut, or is when I saw it, then psychologically the pain was felt? Again, we don't have to go into this. We're just pointing to the fact that the person is taking beliefs and is assuming, taking them as fact. He says, a desperate financial situation. Again, if you are attached, there may be the suffering with a desperate financial situation. But if there's no attachment, then where's the suffering? You see what I'm saying? So how the person is suggesting that suffering is a fact, And then it says, it's true that adding catastrophic thoughts will increase the pain. No, it doesn't increase the pain, it increases the suffering. You see? And the suffering is psychological. The pain is just, part of the human experience. The human experience is painful, that's just the way it is. But what you are in essence is not. And then, but suffering, and dukkha, exists in and of itself in experience. No, suffering does not exist in experience. Suffering is the consequence of the interpretation of the experience. You see? And then it says, as the first noble truth of the Buddha states. Again, did the Buddha write that, or the Buddhist wrote that? Because for all I know, Buddha was not suffering. So the fact that Buddha wasn't suffering, it implies that Buddha discovered that when there's no identification with the thought system, there's no suffering. Ramana Maharshi was not suffering when he had cancer and they wanted to take him to the doctor. And when finally he said, okay, I'll go to the doctor, because all the disciples, all the followers says, please go, take care of that. He's like, okay, I'll do that. He wasn't suffering. He just said, okay, if you want me to go, I'll go, so I can make you happy. And when he went to the doctor, and the doctor, the surgeon who was doing the surgery, Ramana Maharshi says, I don't want anesthesia. And the surgeon says, okay, I'll give you local anesthesia because you need to have some anesthesia here. And what the surgeon says, this is an interview and you can find it in, again, within the world of appearances, okay? What the surgeon says is that while he was performing the operation on Ramana's arm, this man was just looking, there's a sense of peace, of calmness within him that it was unbelievable. That it can take over the whole room. It was incredible, not affected at all. So where's the suffering there? You see, there's no suffering there. So the Buddha, before the Buddha consciousness, might have suffered a lot, but after the Buddha consciousness, he discovered that there's a way of living that is not of this world, so to speak. So you see, the person here is taking the Buddha, the noble truth, you call it, whatever he have read about the Buddha. But again, we take writings about spiritual, I don't know, you could call it teachers or so on. They can be sometimes either misunderstood misinterpreted. And I am not suggesting that I have the absolute truth, and I am not saying here that I am an authority or anything. I'm simply pointing to how things can be seen from the perspective of these videos. If you feel that what we shared here serves you, great. If you feel that it doesn't, then discard it. Because I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, but I am pointing out to see how this person makes a comment, taking as truth things that may not necessarily be true. You see? So he says, and we'll experience it sometimes more intensely and sometimes less. Yeah, the pain can be experienced sometimes more intensely and sometimes less, but the suffering, however, again, which is what this person is pointing to, is a construct of the mind, is the construct of a thought. So that's why it is to say that there's a way of living in the world that is not of it, you see? And this is where these videos are pointing to, and that's why I say don't take anything I'm saying as the truth, just bring it to your personal experience. I mean, notice how you feel when you believe the content of the mind, and notice how you feel when you don't believe the content of the mind. Always remembering that since you're not the doer, you will not do anything because I'm suggesting it. You'll do it if it's happening in your journey, in your script, in your play, in your movie. And yet in the movie it appears as if though there's a you listening to this information, and appears as if there's a me sharing it. So within this seeming appearance, if you don't believe the content of the mind, what remains? You see? That was the drill of the construction this downstairs. So if you don't believe the content of the mind, what remains? What remains is what is. And let me ask you, is there any suffering there? No, it's just what is. And this is what these videos are pointing to. You need to do the investigation yourself. But again, the most important is who are you? This is the that's the cause. When you know, when you cut the tree from the root, then all the branches fall away. You don't have to nitpicking every branch or go through every single branch or every single belief. No, just get to the root. Who am I? When you rest in that, then you experience the peace that surpasses all understanding, which is a life free of suffering. Yeah, there's pain and there's pleasure, but there's no suffering. It's just what is. And put it to the test. Don't take my word for it. Notice that everything is a thought. If you don't believe the thought, what you are, which has always been, becomes evident. And this is what we're exposing, the fact that you are. And that's it. And I'm going to close the video before the drilling continues and keep interrupting. So anyhow, as always, may peace permeate the mind so that love can become evident.